One of the most important things in life is continuous learning, and I think with the digital world, you learn every day, and
Every day.
I've learned a
Exactly.
new thing today.
That's what makes it very interesting. So before we start off, I just want to tell people a bit about you because we have a lot of people that are joining, a lot of mentees, mentors, and people that are going to be learning a lot from this session. So I want to just tell them a bit about you. So we're talking with Mr. Babs Omotowa. I hope I got that correctly.
That's fine.
Okay, is a global leader in the oil and gas industry. He has worked for 26 years with Shell in Nigeria and in Europe. He started working in a storeroom. Very interesting. He rose to become the CEO of Shell subsidiary Nigeria LNG and subsequently the vice president across 4 countries. He's a former global president of the UK Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. He has spoken at the World Economic Summit, universities such as Harvard and MIT, and at many global conferences. He now works with multinational companies and not-for-profit organizations to help them work more effectively in partnership with the developing world, recognizing the bigger issues involved and finding routes to success that are good, not just for business, but at a global and local level. He's the chairman, advisory board, Montserrado Oil and Gas, BV, and today he'll be taking us on a journey on navigating corporate Africa. You're welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Thank you, sir. So I'm going to start off with the first question I would say that is on the mind of a lot of people a lot of people that have heard about you, that know about you, that are curious about you, including myself. So I would say with such an impressive profile and, several public appearances, a lot of people might think they have a fair knowledge of you. They might think, oh, I know who he is. But at the core, who is Babs Omotowa?
Thank you very much. So always a good question to reflect on. I would always describe myself actually as a teacher. At the core of myself is the love for teaching. Of course, the very first job I did after I graduated nearly 40 years ago was as a teacher in a college in Ilorin in Kwara State. I love the job. It has remained the best job I've ever done. And why I love the job was because of the transformation that you see in human beings. Many of my students, when they come in at that time, they know little or nothing, if I can use that word. But over the course of their year in school, in college, they become quite knowledgeable. And they then go on after that college to go and do great, great things. And so when I see many of them today in different places, heading organizations in their own private businesses and all of that, I get a sense of joy. Just to give you an idea of that sense of joy, I got a note via my messenger just about a month ago. One of the students that I saw last in 1988, she sent me a short message. She said, when she was in school, she hated mathematics. She just didn't like mathematics, and she was very poor at it. She said, but when I came in and I started to spend time with them, I started to coach them, I started to teach them in a manner that started to, get her interest. She then started to pay more attention to mathematics. She said that she finally finished school with a distinction in mathematics, and she went on to become a system analyst in a big corporation today. And she says to me that, ever since then, her security password question is my name. That's the impact I had on her. I didn't know this, since such a long time. And when you get a note like that, you just, you feel fulfilled. It's the kind of thing you really feel that you've made an impact, however small it was, that you've made an impact in someone's life. Of course, I didn't
Yes.
stay too long in teaching because the money wasn't so great. So I, at some point, started looking for a job, and I got a job in Shell. Worked there for many years in many different jobs. CEOs and member of the global upstream team, working across 40 countries and all of that. But the only part of that, the whole job that I enjoyed, was actually again the coaching and mentoring of young staff, middle-level managers, and even those who are getting into senior positions. I loved again to see the transformation. People come in, struggle with some things sometimes. They don't understand some things, or they're thinking about their career. We spend time, we talk through that, and they go on to either get much better in what they're doing, or they become great people in their job. And again, I get fulfillment. Again, I got a note not too long ago. I keep getting a lot of notes from people, which is always great. And I got one from a former staff. He worked in Nigeria LNG when I was there. And he said, the first time he really met me, he came to attend an interview, because we had a process whereby we throw open any vacancy in NLNG to anybody in the company. They apply, then they do an interview, we set up a panel, and we interview them. So he applied for one of those jobs that I was the head of the panel for that particular interview. He didn't get the job. He said, but that after the exercise, he felt very disappointed. But I reached out to all of them who didn't get the job. I started to talk to them about what they didn't do well, what they could do better. I spent time to coach them over a period of time about how they could get better. And he said that that changed his life. He really took on quite a number of things from there that then really made him a much better person. He's gone on to do better things, by the way. I think the fulfillment I get from teaching is what I would say defines me. And you can imagine, even in retirement, where I spend more of my time, I do spend time with organization. I do spend time running a PhD program and all of that. But the part that I enjoy the most is opportunities to coach, to mentor. And that is what I would describe myself as at my core.
So at the core is a teacher and mentor. Wow,
Indeed.
that's an amazing profile. So let's talk about your career now. So you have a career that, your profile is loaded. So what would you say propelled your growth in the corporate space?
I will say that character. I would say character. And I think character is one thing that many people sometimes don't think about when they think about a career or how they progress. People think around qualifications or how well they do and all of that. But in my own case, I would say my character was what propelled me. And maybe I will talk about two of them and share some of my stories as well. So I would say, courage and integrity were two characters that really propelled me. Let me give you an example on courage. There was a time I was running, in Shell. I was running one of the activities I was running was logistics. And I thought that the way we were running logistics wasn't great at that time. We had a number of bases. And they were cost centers. So they used to cost the company money. We would award contracts. People would run the logistics base for us and we would pay them money. But I felt we could turn them into revenue centers rather than cost centers, which meant that we will bring in third parties. They will pay money to use the base, and the contractor will manage all of that. We won't have to pay any money. We'll get our services for free and we'll get income. So when I put this idea across, my team were excited to go with that. But in the company, people in contracts and procurement and the lawyers felt, before you can do that, then you have to go and get approval from the shareholders. So I said, no, we don't need to get any approval from shareholders. We need approval when we are spending their money. But if I'm going to make money for them, I don't believe I need the approval. And the lawyer said, well, if you don't follow our advice, then, you have to sign something for us in writing that if anything goes wrong, you will have to carry the consequences. So I said, yeah, bring it. I will sign it. but I'm authorizing my team to go ahead to make the changes and make it happen without the concurrence of the shareholders. This was quite unique because nobody had ever said, you could do a contract without getting approval of the especially the major shareholder. But we went ahead. I was prepared to, take whatever consequences came. And my team, they implemented it, saved lots of money, and we went ahead. And 2 years after, the shareholder wrote a letter. Everybody was expecting that my head would be on the block, but they actually wrote a letter of commendation to say, well done. Wow. We heard that you have done this and it has saved us money. We really applaud you for that. That was the first time ever that you will ever see an approval being given for something you didn't even request an approval for. It's a small example. There's so many examples of courage, but it was one of the things that enabled me to make impact. And I would say, without courage, you don't change the status quo. Without courage, you don't make the big changes that can make a difference. And courage sometimes may require that you are prepared to put your job on the line and you're prepared to take consequences. They always describe that courage is not a lack of fear. It is the belief.
Fear, yes.
It is the belief that something more important is at stake than the fear that you may have. So I will always say courage was one of the things, one of the characters that I demonstrated all through my career that helped make a difference. The other one I would say was integrity. Integrity, I think, also made a big difference. And, many examples of that. I remembered in one instance, I was making I was addressing a conference in Lagos. After the conference, an expatriate contractor CEO came to me in my room to discuss some business issues. When he finished and he was leaving, he then said, it was around Christmas time. He said, I brought you a Christmas card. And I said, thank you. I took the cards, I opened it in his presence, and I found that he had wads of $100 bills. I said to him, this is not acceptable. You're an expatriate. I don't expect you to even try a thing like this. And I will expect you to, if you are making this amount of money, then you should reduce the costs that you are providing services for the organization. So of course I reported this to my company to say, look, this is what happened. And I then also got the contract people to renegotiate the contract with this particular contractor. And they were able to take about 15% off their daily rate. The thing about integrity is that it must, not just be where people see you. Even when you are alone and nobody sees you, your integrity should guide you.
That's where it comes into play.
In every time. And so I would say character and integrity were two big examples. And just to give you an example of the impact that character can make, a few months ago, my former boss, who was the head of Shell in Africa, the executive vice president, when I was there, described how she first came in contact with me. She was describing this in a public audience. She said, when she first got to Africa, to Nigeria, at that time she got to Nigeria, I was in the UK. I was on an assignment in the UK. So I never knew her, I never met her. She said that she had a very sensitive role in Africa. She wanted to feel. And so she went around asking that she was looking for it. It had always been filled by an expatriate. So she said she wanted a Nigerian to fill the role. She said, so she started asking around Shell in Nigeria, asking around Shell in Europe, in the US, that she was looking for a Nigerian that had integrity, had courage, and was smart. And that everywhere she asked, either in Nigeria or in the UK, my name kept coming up. And so she reached out to my bosses in the UK and said, I would like Babs to come back to Nigeria and take this very sensitive role. And so that was how I came back to Nigeria. I never met her. And that's one thing about character. Character speaks for you even when you are not there.
It speaks for you, yes.
And that's the key thing that, to advance in your career, many times when decisions are taken, you will not be there because it will be your bosses who are taking those decisions. And there must be some things that are speaking for you. If there are things that are not speaking for you, like courage, like integrity, like results, like hard work and all of that, you will not be you will not be talked about in such instances. So I would say character was a main aspect of what propelled me. And those are the examples I think throw some lights about it.
You know, so I find it very interesting that as much as I know you would, I mean, you're a teacher, so education is important. Certain things like punctuality, doing the right thing at the right time, be hardworking is important. I really like the fact that you are pointing to things that we would not naturally think of as the things that would propel someone to progress in the corporate setting, like character and integrity. Wow, that's amazing. Anyway, so you obviously you've had your good times, you've had the recommendation, like the example you shared. There was a space and someone was needed to fill the space and your name kept coming up. But I also know that you would have had certain pitfalls in your career. Could you share that with us, please?
I think I will describe probably things that I would say are pitfalls, and I learned some of them also as I went along. I would say attitude is a big one. The attitude that you show, I think, makes a difference. I think, many a times I find that people either focus on things that they have no control over. I remember when I first joined Shell, a few of us joined Shell at the same time. And we used to have what we call annual appraisals. So they would appraise you,
Okay.
they give you, whatever ranking, high, low, medium, whatever ranking they give. They also appraise your potential. And one of the things that I found out was that, a number of my colleagues they were very unhappy about their rating. Maybe they made them just to be good. And they will be, having difficult conversations with their bosses for quite a while. And what that then meant was that they were not putting in their best throughout the period because they kind of were negative to their bosses. But, because I came from a teaching background and my salary was very low anyway when I was a teacher, coming into, oil industry, my salary was very high, and even the bonuses of being very good was more than my salary as a teacher. So I just never bothered about, whatever ranking I got, because I thought, my ranking, I don't control what my boss will think of me. I control what I will do. So if I go and improve on what I'm doing,
Yes.
maybe he might rank me better. But if I'm just getting annoyed with him, he will not change anything. So I would say one of the things I learned about attitude was, don't spend too much time on what you don't control. Spend time on what you control, and have this attitude of, don't have an attitude of I can't. Have an attitude of how can I. My attitude was always, how can I get better? How can I do things better? And sometimes many of us have an attitude of, I can't, it's just not possible. I can't do it. I think once you go into the I can't mentality, your brain kind of closes down. Whereas if you go into the how can I, you might start to become more innovative, more creative, and you might start to think better. The second thing I would say as well is that I think complacency is another shortfall or pitfall that I think I've experienced and I've seen. I think it's very easy to become complacent. Many people rest on their oars. They kind of think they've done it all, or
I've arrived,
I've achieved great success. I think your past success is past. And one of the things we always say is what got you this far may not get you further. Wow. And I think just the example we spoke about earlier, it's a great one. Even yesterday, as we were doing the preparation for this, just testing the systems, I learned quite a lot. I learned quite a lot. And if I look back, when I was growing up, if you achieve 10% savings, for example, it was fantastic achievement. But today, because of the power of things like digitalization, artificial intelligence, in some cases, you can actually even achieve 100% reduction. You can eliminate some things entirely. You can, stop maintenance because you are maintaining by proactive monitoring. You can, use robotics and artificial intelligence to really, achieve productivity that are twice what you used to achieve. So if you're someone who, was resting on your ass, we've been achieving 10% reduction, and you think, yeah, that is great, and you don't learn about some of this new stuff, some of these new capabilities, some of the new opportunities, you will just find yourself, you are totally out of the game. And so complacency, I think, is one of the things that I say can make someone a big pitfall in the industry, in any work you're doing. So I would say your attitude and being complacent would be two things that I would encourage that people need to avoid to be able to go on to do great things.
Okay. Wow, that's thank you very much, sir. Now, I want to say to those of us that are following, those who have joined in and are watching, we have the section. If you look at your screen at the bottom, you'll see the question mark section. So please type in your questions there. Don't type it in the comment section. Just type it in that. Just click on that place and type in your questions. So it will be easy to see your questions. I know we have a lot of questions that will be coming in today for you, sir. So, okay, what would you say is the single most important skill for successful team management?
I think I would say maybe communication. Communication. Because once you have more than one person, once you have 2, 3, 4, 5 people working together, or even a large organization, it's very important to communicate, because if you don't communicate, you'll be making assumptions, and people will also be making their own assumptions. So I would say, communicating your objectives, communicating the plans, communicating the progress, communicating the successes, communicating the failures, the challenges, I think is very important in any team. It will ensure, for example, that people are clear on what they need to deliver. People are clear on where you are, on where you are going. People are clear on how progress is being made, or if there are issues, they're clear. It avoids rumor mongering, as an example, and I think it helps even in motivating people when you communicate. I remember, when I went to Nigeria LNG, one of the key things that I found out when I got in there was that there was quite a lot of what I would call a culture that was, weak in many areas. One of it was that there was a lot of rumor mongering in the company. It was really a company that had rumors all over the place. In fact, you could nearly say it was management by rumor mongering. And part of the reason, of course, was that communication wasn't so great. There were silos in the organization, and there was not much communication. And that meant that there was sub-optimization, because the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. They didn't understand what the challenges were. And I think that didn't help the organization as a whole. But we walked through a culture journey, and bottoms up, the staff themselves came up to, everybody can understand that, it's a better place if there's better communication. There were a lot of other cultural, behavioral things we changed, but communication was one of them. And, we implemented things like town hall meetings every month, where we discussed everything. People could ask questions of the whole management team. We had the CEOs and monthly, weekly reports that were going out so that everybody knew what was going on. I had meetings with groups of staff and small groups, so that, not everybody can talk in big groups. So have the opportunities to talk in small groups. As we improved the communication, I think the teamwork started to improve. Everybody started to understand where the company was going, what the issues, what the challenges. I think it makes a better atmosphere for any team. So I would say, there are many issues about the teamwork. You could talk about several things. You could talk about, motivation. You could talk about a lot of other things, planning. You could talk about many things. But I would say communication is a big part that is like a glue that makes the team really work more effectively.
Stick together. Wow. Okay, so all right, we'll go to the next question, which says, there's a popular phrase, high risk, high reward. How can we determine if a high risk venture is worth going into?
That's a great question. I would think maybe there are two aspects to that. One of that is, of course, what is your risk appetite as an individual? Because I think we're all different. Some people could be risk takers, for example. Some people could be risk averse, for example. I think you must always ask yourself, how much can you afford to lose? What's your threshold for loss? I think it's important to think through that in terms of where you are and what you can survive with. Maybe just to give an example, I think if you are a young 20-year-old person, or if you're a mid-level career person, or if you are an old retiree like myself, I think the risk appetite may be different. So if I give an example, if I just give a small example, people could invest money, for example, in say properties. That's low, you could say it's low risk relatively. Or you could invest in stock, a bit of small, medium risk there. Or you could even invest in Bitcoin or something more risky. I will think that if you are mature and you are, say, a retiree like myself, your chances of recovery, if you lose your money, if you lose your saving, is reduced because you're not going to be the one that can easily get new jobs. You don't have many more years. You're probably in your retirement age. People don't want to employ you. And so your ability to lose money should be less than if you are 20-year-old.
So your risk should be lower.
Your risk should be lower. But if you are 20-year-old, I would say, why not invest your money in Bitcoin, take risk. If you lose all your money at 20 years, you still have 40 years more to, work or do anything.
To recover.
So if I was looking at those three things, for example, if I'm in a mature, older age, I would say maybe you put 70% of your money in stable things like property. You put 20% maybe in something like stock, and put 10% in something like Bitcoin. I'm not saying don't take risk at all, but your risk should be what you can afford to lose. If you're in middle age, I would say, for example, you shouldn't, maybe properties you put 40%, maybe stock you put 40% again because you can afford to, get upside from it, and maybe 20% even in something like Bitcoin. I'm just using this as an example. And if you're a younger person, I would say, why not go 50% for Bitcoin and even 50% for, stock, and maybe 10% for property or something. You have a lot more time in front of you to make mistakes, learn, but you also have opportunities to correct yourself if you fail. So I would say the first thing I would say is, what's your risk appetite and what does that do for you? But the second thing I would also say is, what's the gain? What's your gain? And what does that gain mean to you? If the gain means a lot to you, then you can take more risk as well. If I use a very maybe serious example, if somebody's gain would be to save a life, that's a big gain. I would say. I would say, it's worth taking a risk on to save somebody's life. But if it's the reward is not so great, I would say, why are you taking such a big risk? So I would say your risk appetite, where you are in terms of your risk profile, and what the gain is, and what the gain means to you. It's not just the size of the gain, but what does it mean to you? $1 million, for example, may not mean much to Dangote. $1 million may mean much to somebody who doesn't have money. So what's your what does the gain mean to you will be the second thing I would think you should think about when you think of your risk investment and your risk ventures.
Okay. Wow. So, sir, when you talk to a lot of people, you find out that even those that have regular jobs are thinking of something, they think outside the box in terms of earning extra sources of income. Sorry, making, earning extra by the side, looking for extra sources of income. So the question is, for someone who is in a regular 9-to-5 job and you're thinking like an entrepreneur, you're hoping that someday you'll be able to step out of this and into something that you're passionate about. At what point do you know that it's time for you to make that move?
My short answer will be now. Will be my short answer.
Wow.
And,
that's if your risk appetite is high.
I would say, even if it's low, start now. But of course, what you'll be thinking about may be different because you don't all do the same thing. And let me give you an example. When I first joined Shell, I was a young chap at that time. A few of us joined together. And, when we got our first salary, I mean, as a young man, I went to buy a Jeep at that time. I said that I needed a Jeep, and, we were paid a lot of allowances up front and all of that. Many of us bought cars, and some of us, started to enjoy life, if I use the words. We partied a bit. We spent our money, on what I would call the good things of life. But I remember there was one of our colleagues. He was paid his salary. He went and bought a plot of land in what was then a bush called Lekki.
Wow.
And every time we got our salary, we would go on enjoying life. He would take his salary, go and buy another plot in that bush called Lekki. It was a bush.
Oh my goodness.
And he continued to do that. We continued to enjoy life. I used to enjoy driving my Jeep all over the place. And this kind of continued for a while. I think by the end of this second year, he had saved enough money. He set up a small real estate company by the side in Lagos. We were in Warri at that time. He set up this small company in Lagos. And he started to build on some of this land he bought in the bush called Lekki at that time. Anyway, fast forward 5-6 years after, he left Shell. He retired. And he had already this business in Lekki that was booming. He was already a real estate owner. And before we knew, Lekki became the next best thing after he could be in Lagos.
It is.
You can imagine how successful he is today, from starting small and starting to utilize his money well. And so that's my experience. And what I found out was that the longer you stay to start to invest and start to put money into investment, the more difficult it becomes for you. Because, of course, we were kind of enjoying life in our beginning. Sooner than later, we got married. We started having children. And before you know, you get responsibilities. You start to think, oh, I can't live because I need money to pay school fees. I need money to take care of my responsibilities. Before you know, you start to get promoted. You start to feel, oh, I seem to have a good career. And before you realize it's 20 years is gone, you get very comfortable, and you just never leave again. But the fact is that you will leave at some point. You will retire at some point. You can't live all your life and die in a company. So you must prepare for the day to leave. And the earlier you prepare, the better. And the earlier you start to put something aside, the better. And once you do that and you put something aside and you gradually grow it, at some point you will see how it is doing. If it is doing very well, at some point you can go and actually retire early. And I think it was Robert Kiyosaki who wrote a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, and I think one of the things he said there is never get comfortable collecting a paycheck. If you get comfortable collecting a paycheck, you get trapped. So you must not never be comfortable with a
True.
paycheck, because no matter how much an employer loves you, he cannot pay you exactly what you are contributing to his organization. He must make profit. So you're never getting your full worth pay in whatever organization you are. So the earlier you start to think about putting things aside, the less comfortable you are with a paycheck, I think the more you are likely to go on and build your own business and grow it and get yourself more time on your hand. Your creativity allows you to do great things into the future. So my short answer to your question will be now.
But sir, I'm just curious, is it safe to say that while you're at your 9 to 5, you're doing something by the side and just waiting for that day you step out? Or can you just, like the courage you talked about, just pick up courage and say, you know what, I'm leaving next week?
I think it's a great question you ask. And I always say that there is no one answer for everyone, because of course everyone is in a different place. So I never give an answer that's the same. But I will say, once you look at your circumstance, number one, do you have the idea you want to go out for already? If you have it already and you are very clear about it, and especially if it's a transformational thing, an opportunity to go and do something that you think is revolutionary, is not been done before, then I would say don't waste too much time before you go and do it.
Let's go for it.
You might have to sit in the garage of yourself to make it happen. But if you think of Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Apple, Steve Jobs, many of these people have sat in their garages and suffered for a lot of time to bring their creativity to fruition. But it then grew to become great things. I mean, Apple today is worth over 2 trillion naira. I think it's you have to believe in yourself at some point. So I would say, if you have a creative idea, innovative idea, breakthrough type thinking, yes, you should consider having the courage to go out so that you're able to concentrate on it, put your full-time attention to it. Because of course, if you're doing a 9 to 5, you can't put your full attention to anything. You must be growing little by little. So I would say horses for courses, in the sense of where you are should determine whether you indeed break out immediately. And I will encourage anyone who has those great ideas, do break out and have the courage to do it. If you don't have those great ideas and you just want to set up small normal businesses like property or food business or the usual type businesses, I will say grow them before you branch out.
Wow. Thank you, sir. You would be amazed how many people's questions you've answered with just this short statement. Okay, so many people dream, how can young people motivate and drive themselves towards hard and smart work, even when they do not see enough success stories because of the environment, their network, and situation? How can young people motivate and drive themselves?
I think it's a great question as well. And I always say that you are a product of your mindset. If you think the cup is half empty or you think the cup is half full, it makes a difference. And what you think, what your attitude is, what your habit is, what your reflections are, what you do affects you. So I will first say that if you think that your environment, your network, or your situation is a problem, I think you're already thinking in a wrong way, I will say to you. You're already thinking the glass is half empty. If I look at Nigeria, for example, let me just give you, a few things. Look at Okonjo-Iweala. She's just become the WTO Director General. Ngozi lived in a village when she was growing up. She was left in the care of her grandparents in a village. She lived in a period when there was a civil war. There were millions of people who were dying around her. She lived with her grandparents. if you read her story, you will see she went through things that were just, impossible. But she never defined herself with those. And no wonder today she's the DG of the World Trade Organization. Look at Adewumi Adesina, who's in AFDB.
Yes.
I can go on and on. I tell you quite a number of people who have grown through what you think of our difficult environment in Nigeria, who grew up in the villages, who grew up and have gone to do great things. So I would say never define yourself by your environment, because if you do that, you limit yourself. For example, I grew up, my father was a farmer, so I kind of grew up in the farm. And, I will tell you that a lot of my learning and my growing up years were spent in the farm. And when I started, as you described in my introduction, when I started in Shell, I started in a warehouse, in a store. The lowest job you can start with in a company. Wow. Nobody at that time had ever risen to be a general manager from the warehouse. In fact, hardly had anybody risen from that storeroom to be a manager. Hardly. And I had no connection. I knew nobody. I have never known anybody all my life. Nobody has ever been my sponsor or my
godfather.
No godfather, none of that. I've never had any. And from that storeroom, the lowest job, where nobody had ever risen beyond to be a manager, I chose not to be defined by my environment. I chose that I would write my own story. I would put myself in my job. I would develop myself. I will continuously learn. I will continuously try to improve. I will continuously put myself forward. I will continuously work very, very hard. I will change my situation. I will impact. I will drive impact. We have a dog. We have a dog saying that.
I'm so sorry.
So I will say that don't let your environment define you. Don't let your situation define you. Most of the people who have achieved greatness in life came from very poor backgrounds, came from very difficult backgrounds. They went and achieved great things from that. So my first comment to people will be, never be defined by your environment, never be defined by your network. Write your own story. Never be a half glass empty person. Never be pessimistic. If you just think the world hates you, you cannot achieve anything in the world, everything is against you. If you have victim mentality, it will play on how much you can achieve. But despite your circumstance, I'm not saying people are not going through difficult times and challenges, but despite all of that, I think be determined to write your own story, be determined to make a difference, be determined, and it will surprise you what you can achieve. It will surprise you what you can get to with such positive attitude.
In fact, my next hashtag is going to be #write your own story. I mean, refusing to just be defined by anything. That's a very important one. Okay, so sir, I'm holding this very interesting book that you talked about, From the Storeroom to the Boardroom. And this book is actually, we have something interesting for everyone who has logged in. So please make sure you stay till the end. But in the meantime, sir, I want you to give us some insight on this book and any closing remarks that you have on achieving success in the corporate space.
Thank you very much. I think the book, one of the reasons I wrote the book was, again, I thought it was important for leaders to share some of their stories, the lessons they learned, some of the things that worked well, some of the things that didn't work well, their failures, their challenges, their successes, how they went about it, what they learned, so that several other people can read and learn. I find that when I was growing up, one of the best ways I learned was reading stories. We were told stories. We used to say stories under the moonlight in those days. And that was one way in which we learned a lot of lessons. And I encourage a lot of my those who were more senior to me, I had encouraged them when they were retiring that you should write a book. So, of course, when I retired, I had to do exactly what I had encouraged others to do.
Exactly.
I had to write a book myself. But it was an opportunity for me to share my lessons. So in the book, there are two main parts of the book. One part was a lot of my stories. It's all about stories that happened either before I joined Shell. Some of it were lessons I learned while I was growing up in the farm, teaching while I was growing up.
Yes, sir.
How many of those lessons came to define my character, my behaviors that were then visible through my working career. I then showed quite a lot of the stories about how I was able to rise from the storeroom and have a career that rose to become not only the CEO of the biggest industrial complex in sub-Saharan Africa, but to become a member of Shell's global upstream leadership team across 40 countries from such a low level beginning. What were some of the things that I thought played a role and what I felt people could learn from those? What some of my failures, for example, I actually had to repeat the fourth form in secondary school, and I learned quite a lot from that failure because it taught me a lesson around, the companies you keep can define how you can be. I was a very good student up until the fourth form, but I started to mix with bad friends. I don't call them bad friends. I started to mix with friends who taught me bad things. And, I then stopped focusing on my academics. So, some of the failures, even in working life, I describe some of those failures, what I learned, and I describe a lot of things that I also found helped me in my career. So people can learn from it and they can make use of it. The second part of the book is also about organizations. What organizations that work in multinationals, especially who come to developing countries that are challenging, the difficulties they face on issues, including corruption, including community issues, those sort of difficult issues, capacity issues in society, supply chain challenges, how they can help create capacity in countries, such that organizations can also get an insight into what it takes to be successful in developing countries. So that I would say those are the two aspects of the book, but there's full of stories. Some of them are fascinating stories, stories around even difficult challenges with government, how I was probably nearly removed as the CEO of a Nigerian LNG because I refused to pay, monies that were not due. So you read some very fascinating stories in it, but all of it geared to bring out lessons, to bring out things that hopefully can help people to do well.
Yes.
In terms of your request for my closing, I think, I would say to people, number one, have a belief in yourself. You must believe in yourself. As I said, I think you must be positive. Never carry a victim mentality. I think always carry a winner's mentality. You are better than your environment. You are the one that should, write your own story, define yourself.
Yes.
I would encourage that you need to have core values. Core values are your character. I think help you to make a difference, help you to navigate difficulties, helps you to navigate challenges, helps you even to define yourself such that even when you are not there, people will say, this is who you are. And if your core values match your character and match your brand, then that is fantastic. If your core character does not match your brand, then there's a problem. You're not authentic. So I think you must always ask yourself, what's my brand reputation? Is that my character, and does that reflect my core values? If it does not, I will say you have work to do. And whatever your brand reputation is, can it take you far when you are not there. If you are known as if your brand reputation is that you are not hardworking, you are troublesome, you are always quarreling with everybody, you don't work well with teams. If that's your brand reputation, do you think that will carry you far? If it wouldn't, then I think you need to work on your character, your core values. If you are found, are you a reliable person? Can people rely on you? Do they think you're hardworking? Do they think you are a team player? Are you inclusive? All this, I think.
Yes.
Always find out what your brand reputation is, and if they are not things that will take you far, then I think you need to work on them, work very hard. But finally, I would say at the end of the day, always think about your happiness. Sometimes we get carried away with a lot of the flamboyance of life. We get carried away with several things. But you should always ask yourself, one of the things I always teach to my children is think about what will make you happy. Because when I coach people, I always tell them this. Some of you may say you want to become CEO. You could be very unhappy as a CEO because you don't know what some of those jobs entail and what sacrifices you may make. So think hard about what makes you happy and make sure that you align your career towards what you know will make you happy, not just a role, but something that you will do, you will enjoy, it will meet your purpose, and also think about your happiness from some of the things that are very important to you in life. So I, for example, I find my relationship with God and my children and my wife are very, very important, and more important than any job that I can ever do. Some ask why I retired a lot earlier than I should have. I still had a lot of headroom. I had been told what my next job would be. I was going to be looking after 80 countries, but I said no. If I do that, I'm going to be sacrificing my family, and I've done enough of that. I need to now go and spend more time with my family. So I will say to you, always think about what makes you happy, and also put attention to that, not just attention to pursuing career, pursuing, people pursue wealth sometimes. I always say contentment is more important than wealth. If you are content, you don't need so much money. If you are not content, there is no amount of money that will ever be enough for you. So happiness will be the last thing I will say. Always keep that in mind as well.
So insightful, sir. So insightful. We have a couple of questions. Let me read out one for us. Sir, please, how do you manage a team that's constantly complaining when it comes to executing tasks?
That's a great question. And I think what that suggests to me is an opportunity for you to coach and mentor part of that team. And, the role of a leader of a team is also about coaching. And when you find someone complaining, don't think of them in that complaining manner. Think of them as an opportunity to improve them. Find out why they are complaining, what's behind that, and how can you work with them to help them. Because sometimes a complaint might be a cry for help. But I think you should look at it more as a coaching opportunity. Look at it as a mentoring opportunity. You can turn some of the worst complainers to become some of the best performers in a team. But it is by the opportunity to coach, to mentor them, that you can turn them around and you can make a difference. And it's by looking at every member of your team as a resource and a talent. If you look at them that way, it's about how do you get the best out of them? How do you get them to deliver their potential? And if you form a coaching relationship with them, which enables you to dialogue with them, to listen to them, to find out what are the issues, find out where you can support them. Sometimes it requires you to support them. You will be surprised how they can turn around and become superstars in your team because you've invested time in them, you've listened to them, you've made them feel like a human being, and you may be surprised what they will turn out to become.
Wow. So it's like everything you do, that heart of a teacher always comes forth, you know. Okay, so the next question is, how can a person transition who doesn't have an engineering background? How can a person transition into oil and gas in a non-engineering role?
Of course, there are many non-engineering roles in the oil and gas. So engineering role in oil and gas, probably, I would think maybe about 20-30% of roles in oil and gas is engineering role. We have commercial roles, you have finance roles, you have human resource roles, you have contracts and procurement roles. So if a lot of the roles are not engineering roles, they are finance roles, commercial roles, human resourcing roles. So there's a lot of room in the oil and gas for non-engineering graduates.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm not.
Okay, so someone wants to
I finished as an industrial chemist, for example. So I'm not an engineer myself, and I started working. I started working in a storeroom. I also later on started working in an engineering role because I decided to learn and put myself forward to study, to understand, to learn. So you can start from a finance role, or start from a board storeroom role, or start from a contract role and learn, and even start working in an engineering type role.
Okay. So let's take the last question and let you go. So how do you manage corporate stakeholders' expectation and humanity's concerns?
That's a great question. And I think, I always say that especially in a developing country like Nigeria, the role of organization is not just about shareholder value. It's about stakeholder value. And it's about maximizing stakeholder value. Because if you don't maximize stakeholder value in a developing country, you cannot maximize shareholder value. If, for example, you don't think about the bigger issues like employment, like industries, like infrastructure, even your own costs will be very high. Even your own ease of operation will be very, very difficult. So you must continuously be thinking about stakeholder value. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the one bearing the cost of that, but it means you must remain engaged, either engaged with the government, engaged with the international agencies, to be able to bring in some of those capacities that may not exist, to be able to bring them into country. So you may leverage your company to bring in some of those capacity, leverage your company to bring in the government to solve some of those societal bigger issues. But it is critically important in a developing country that maximizing stakeholder value is what you focus on, because if you don't do that, you cannot even achieve maximizing shareholder value. If you are in a developed country where the stakeholder issues are not so there, you don't have community issues, you don't have infrastructure issues, you're in the UK or in the US, then of course you can just focus on your shareholder value significantly and drive that. But if you do that in a developing country, I think you will not maximize your value, because your cost will be very high. You will be disrupted quite a lot of times, and you will not be a corporate citizen that really gets a good brand in the place where you operate as well.
Wow, sir. In fact, I really don't know what to say, because for me, this night has been like being in a classroom and learning so much. There's a lot of insight. You've shared so much, and you share from your heart. I can literally feel that heart of a father, speaking. Even when you talked about how you have certain people with certain attitudes on your team, there's a way you go about it rather than just giving up on people. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything you've shared with us this evening, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Any last words before you leave?
No, I think maybe just to say to you, thank you very much for this. You've made it a very interesting session. I as I mentioned to you, I've learned from you about Instagram, so I'm now better with Instagram. So thank you for that. Thank you to Ibrahim and the Mentor Africa team. I think you're doing an excellent job. I think your focus on mentoring, I think is a huge, huge value. I hope you take a lot of satisfaction from the impact you make. You know, as you will find out, your reward sometimes is not in the wealth you will make out of it. Your reward will be when you see the people that you have, played a part, no matter how small it may be. When you see them go on to do great, great things, you get a joy and a satisfaction that I think is more than any material wealth could give you. So kudos to all of you, and also to those who have participated, who are mentees and who are listening and who are learning. I commend you. I encourage you to continue to take the advantage to learn from the various mentors that are there. I think it's one of the things that people don't do enough of in Nigeria and probably in Africa, that the people don't reach out to get mentors and to learn from others. I think this platform provides you that opportunity. So I encourage you. I applaud all of you who are mentees and who have joined also today. Take advantage of all the mentors that have gone through. You don't have to make the same mistakes others have made, and you can learn how to be more effective by people who have been effective in their lives. So kudos, well done to all of you, and thank you for allowing me to contribute to your platform.
Thank you very much, sir. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.